All right, quiz review 3537, talking about parallel perpendicular lines. We're graphing, we're finding slope, we're trying to write our own equations. Let me first just give you the answers so that when you scroll down here, you can check yourself to see which ones that you need to do. So here are the answers if you really quick want to pause the video and double check your answers before we get started. That way you can fast forward to just the ones that you need. All right, so here we go. Starting off with number one. Let me get two at a time up here. Make this a tad bit smaller. All right, number one, find the slope of each line. So when you're given a graph to find the slope, you pretty much need to find two perfect lattice points where it crosses. So if I keep moving down the line, it looks like the next perfect spot is all the way down here. So I know that this thing is negative because it's decreasing from left to right. And the vertical change is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks down. And we're running 4 blocks to the right. So that would be a negative 7/4. Number two, when you're given 2 points. So one thing you could do is you could draw them on graph paper, which is kind of time consuming. A faster way using algebra, you could use the slope equation, y2 minus y1 equals x2 subtract x1. You know, and this is your first order pair, this is your second order pair, and you could do that. So you would have, what would that be? -1 minus 0 over 7 minus a -2, which will give me an answer of -1 over 9. And the negative you just bring out to the front, and it would be -1/9. Now the way I've been showing a lot of the times too is something newer called a slope slide, where you stack these points up, and the order doesn't matter. I'm purposely going to do this in a little bit different order than the first one, just to show you get the same answer. So the slope slide, you kind of come straight down and you go to the right. That way you're forced to get the y's on top, and you subtract. So I do y minus a -1. And on the bottom, I'm going to get -2 subtract 7, which when I work this out, plus a positive is 1, plus a negative is 9. Notice the difference here. The negative was on top. Here the negative is on bottom. Either way, you just pull it out to the front, and you get that answer. Now, just a little quick word of caution. If I were to have gotten -1 over -9, you basically drop the negatives, and the correct answer would just be positive 1/9. But that's not the answer to this question, just kind of showing you a little something extra. All right, moving right along. Number 3 and number 4, find the slope of each line. Well, it depends on what form it's written in. You know, this right here is slope-intercept form. It's in y equals mx plus b, which is really lovely because right here is the slope. So I know the answer to this question is just 2. Just a little quick refresher that the 4 represents our b or our y-intercept. Another thing you should know is that slope is often referred to as m, right here. All right, next one, find the slope of this line. So remember, my answer is going to be a fraction. Unfortunately, this is written in standard form. So for standard form, I need to change standard form, and I need to rewrite it in slope-intercept form, which basically means I need to solve for y in terms of x. So let's solve for y here. I'm going to subtract the 3x from both sides, and I get 2y equals -3x minus 2. So I'm getting it closer and closer into this form. Now I'm going to divide everybody by 2. And in slope-intercept form, I now have y equals -3/2 x, subtract 1. And so now I can see that the slope of this line is -3/2. Correct answer. All right, let's keep right on going here. Number 5 and number 6. Still finding slope. Very important concept. We can't really write equations if we don't know how to first find the slope. So find the slope of a line parallel. Remember, parallel lines need to have the same slope or the same steepness. So When I look at number 5, I don't know what the slope is, so let's find it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite it in slope-intercept form. And I get negative x minus 5 on the right. Divide everybody by 5. And remember, that's kind of a negative 1 if you don't see a value there. So I end up with y equals negative 1/5 x subtract 1. And I now know that the slope of this line is negative 1/5. So since I need to keep it the same, my slope needs to be negative 1/5. So that will guarantee give me a slope of a line that's parallel. Now this next one, I want a line that's going to be perpendicular. So the key thing about the slope of perpendicular lines is they need to be opposites and they need to be reciprocals. Okay? Or flips of each other. So first let's find the slope of this line. So first thing I'm going to do, again, it's in standard form. I need to kind of tweak that. And I get y equals negative 2x. I really don't need to write the 0. Divide both sides by negative 1. And I end up with y equals 2x. So here's slope-intercept form. And I now can see the slope. I see that m equals 2. But if I want to make it perpendicular, if I want to make it be 90 degrees, what I need to do is I need to flip it. Well, I can't really flip it unless I put a 1 under there. Now I can flip it. So I've done this part. And now I need to make them opposites, meaning different signs. This one on the left was positive, so my answer needs to be negative. So number 6 is a negative 1/2. All right, moving on to 7 and 8. Now I got to do a little bit of graph sketching here. So first one, the x-intercept is 4. All right, well here's the x-axis, so if I cross at 4, that would be that point. The y-intercept is at negative 1, so that's where I cross this y-axis. And now I pretty much can just connect the dots together. And it looks like it's going up 1 over 4. So I'm going to just go down 1, left 4 to kind of give me another one. And if I had a ruler or a straight edge, I could make that really pretty. Number 8, sketch the graph of this line. Well, this one is in slope-intercept form, so this one should be pretty straightforward. I start with the y-intercept, where I cross the y-axis. I always do that first. So I start at 3. And then my slope, my m, is a negative 1. So b was 3. My m is negative 1. And so now I'm going to put a 1 under it. And remember, negative slopes, we go down and right. So I go down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1. Keep it going. I'm going to run it back the other way. Knock that out. We're good to go. Moving right along. Number 9 and number 10. Sketch the graph of this line. This one's a little bit tricky because this is standard form. So we need to convert from standard to slope-intercept because it's much easier to graph. So I'm going to kind of move over here where I have a little bit of room. And first thing I need to do is get that x to the other side. And I get 2y equals negative x plus 4. I need to divide both sides by 2. Divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. Put a little negative 1 there. So now I end up with y equals negative 1/2 x plus 2, which now I have my key features that I need. Key feature is y-intercept of 2. Boom. And then I have a slope of negative 1/2, which means I'm going to go down 1, right 2. Down 1, right 2. Down 1, right 2. Go back the other way. And connect them. Got it. All right, number 10. Now we're kind of working backwards. They're giving me the line. I need to write my own equation for it. And I know I need to be in y equals mx plus b form. So let's figure out the features. Well, b is right here. B is a positive 5. So that's that part. You know, I know y is going to be in there. I know x is going to be in there. Well, now I got to figure out my slope. So I go down, down until I get to a nice crossing point, which looks like doesn't happen until way down here. So what did I do here? I dropped 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I dropped 6, and then I ran 5. So that is a negative 6 over 5. So there's a nice equation. Be sure that you're putting it in the correct form. They're going to tell you what form you should be in. So moving right along, number 11, number 12. Things are getting a little bit harder. They're giving me less information. Luckily, I get to leave it in slope-intercept form, which is nice. And remember, to write your own equation, you need the slope and you need the y-intercept. So let's see what they give me. Well, they give me a point. So they gave me an x comma y that works, lives on the line. And they told me the slope is negative 2. That's huge. So that right there gives me a starter equation. Y equals mx plus b. And now I'm going to use the method that we've been calling solve for b, which basically you need to plug x and y in and figure out what b is. And remember, you got to kind of crisscross here because that's the y and that's the x. So I get 3 equals a negative 2 times 2 added to b. That's 3 equals negative 4 plus b. I add 4 to both sides. And that hooks me up with b equals 7. So now I have all the ingredients I need. I should be able to write my own final equation in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. If you wanted to check it to see if it works, you could go on Desmos.com, or you could graph it by hand and just make sure that it does go through this point and it does have that slope. You could verify it. Number 12, we're getting a little bit trickier here. 2 issues. 12 is a hard problem because of 2 things. Number 1, I don't see an m or a b. They don't give me either one. And then the even harder part is I need to get this thing into standard form. So a couple things kind of before we even get rolling here. And I'm going to write this over here on this side. I'm actually going to clear this out. A couple things that you need to know about standard form. There are basically 3 things. Standard form. Number 1, no fractions. So we're going to have to clear the fractions if we have them. Number 2, we need to get x and y on the same side. So we need to do some manipulating and moving them around. And number 3, not everybody abides by this rule, but I'm kind of old school. So I believe that the coefficient, if I spelled that right, coefficient in front of x must be positive. So that may involve multiplying by a negative 1 here towards the end. All right, so anytime I need to write an equation, I need an m, I need a b. I got neither one. So let's try to find the slope. So I'm going to use the slope slide. I'm going to just basically stack up the points just because I kind of like using this thing. It keeps things straight. So I subtract my coordinates. I got y minus y. I have x minus x, which if you need to do this in your calculator, go ahead. If not, we'll do it by hand here. Negative 2/5. So I now have a slope of negative 2/5. That is enough to get me a starter equation. Y equals negative 2/5 x plus b. We now need to solve for b, just like we did in the last problem. I'm going to use this point on the left because I like 0. 0 wipes things out a lot of times. So if I plug this in for x and I plug this in for y, it looks like we're going to luck out and we're going to have negative 3 equals 0 plus b, which was really nice. So b just equals negative 3. So now I have a slope-intercept equation of y equals negative 2/5 x minus 3, okay? But this is slope-intercept form. You always have to start there. You want to start in slope-intercept form. But now we need to tweak it to standard form. So we got to make sure these three things over here happen. So let's knock out the first one. No fractions. Well, how I clear out fractions is I multiply by the bottom number here. That I want to clear that 5 out. So I'm going to multiply every piece by 5. And right there, that times by 5, divide by 5's cancel. Don't forget to times him by 5 as well. And I now have 5y equals negative 2x, subtract 15. So this step is accomplished. I've got no fractions. So now let's go ahead and let's try to get x and y on the same side. So I'm going to do that by adding 2x and adding 2x. And I now end up with 2x plus 5y equals negative 15. And I think that step 3 is already taken care of because the number in front of x is positive already, so we don't need to do anything. So there's your correct answer. So that standard form will go through both of these points, and you could check that again by hand or on Desmos. All right, moving on to 13 and 14. I believe these are our last two questions. So number 13, I look at the directions, slope-intercept form, thank you. That's always easier. So what do I need? I always got to start with a slope and an intercept. And they don't explicitly tell me the slope, but they do say I have to be parallel to this guy, which means I got to keep my slope the same. So if his slope is 3, my slope has to be 3. So that's enough to get a starter equation going. Y equals 3x plus b. I now substitute x and y, and I get 2 equals 3 times 1 plus, I don't know, 2 equals 3 plus b. And then I'm going to minus the 3 from both sides, and I get b equals negative 1. So that should allow me to finish the equation here for a final answer of y equals mx plus b. Good to go. All right, last one. Big dog. We got standard form we got to deal with. We got perpendicular we got to deal with. Right now we got no m and we got no b. All right, we don't have either one of those. So let's get an m. The perpendicular, this guy has a slope of negative 4/5. Remember, perpendicular, I got to do two things. I need to flip it, and I need to change the sign to positive. So there we go. We got a slope. Let's get a starter equation going. Y equals 5/4 x plus b. We are now going to do a little bit of substituting. 3 goes in for the y, 4 goes in for the x, and I get 3 equals 5/4 times x, which is just 4, or if I want to do it by hand, I can put 4 over 1, plus b, and I get 3 equals, and that comes out to be 20 divided by 4, which is just 5. Again, I showed you how to use your fraction button on the calculator, so you could just use your calculator there if you need to. Minus 5 from both sides, I get b equals negative 2. So we should be able to get started now with slope-intercept. Y equals mx plus b. So this is slope-intercept form, but the directions say, hey, no, you got to go further. So first thing we got to do is clear out the fractions. So let's clear out this 4 down here. We got to clear that out by multiplying everybody by 4. And remember, these just cancel. That's why we chose 4. So I got 4y equals 5x minus 8. Oh, we're getting close. So no fractions. Next thing we got to do is get x and y on the same side. So let's minus the 5x from both sides. And that gives me negative 5x, positive 4y, equals negative 8. And then that rule number 3 for standard form, I'm not allowed to have this negative coefficient in front of x. So I need to multiply this entire equation by -1, which basically just changes everybody's signs. When I multiply, each person gets multiplied by that -1. It's kind of like you're distributing all the way through. Final answer, 5x minus 4y equals 8. All right, so hopefully you've got the skills now to be ready for the quiz. The key idea you really got to come up with is you always need to be able to get the M and the B before you can get started, and then just pay attention to what form you have to finish up in. All right, good luck tomorrow. See you.